Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
So good, so good, so good.
New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. Today, I'm joined by my politics team colleagues, reporter Kyle Ingram, and for her debut on the Under the Dome podcast, our new higher education reporter, Jane Sartwell. We're recording this on Monday, January 26th, as Raleigh in the Triangle is still coated in a layer of ice for now anyway. It'll probably melt as the day goes on, could refreeze overnight. So anyone listening to this as you're driving in the morning, please be careful on the roads out there. This episode, we're going to talk about UNC Trustees, what to expect at Board of Governors. House Oversight is this week, and there's things going on about the primary and state board of elections. We're going to start first with Kyle for our election and voting news. So tell us how early voting will be different this year than in the last midterm.
Yes, so election officials have been hard at work approving early voting plans for the March primary election. And we wanted to compare how early voting access is going to be different now compared to the last comparable election, because this is the first time in nearly a decade that all of North Carolina's election boards have been run by Republican majorities. That was, of course, due to a controversial state law that stripped those appointments from the governor, instead gave them to the Republican state auditor. So when we look at comparing these, the temptation would be to go back to the most recent election, which was the 2024 presidential election. But that's not really comparable because we are in a midterm year. It's a primary. There's just always going to be lower turnout for these things. So we have to look all the way back to 2022. And when we did that, what we found was that the state has actually, in a total sense, increased the number of early voting sites across the state by about 15. But there are other trends going on that sort of reflect some long-going partisan disputes over how voting access works. And one of those things is Sunday voting. For a long time, Republicans have generally been opposed to allowing early voting sites to be open on Sundays. It's something Democrats have really pushed for. It's something that is popular. There's Souls to the Polls events where churches will head to the polls after they have their service on Sundays. And what you saw this year is that there is going to be noticeably fewer counties with Sunday voting than in 2022. So back then there were about 30 counties. This year it'll be 20. Some of that comes in contentious decisions where when a county board of elections can't agree on a plan, so perhaps the Republican majority is saying we don't want to have Sunday voting anymore, the Democrats are objecting and saying we do. When that happens and the board isn't unanimous, that dispute gets kicked up to the State Board of Elections, which governs all of North Carolina's 100 counties. And that was what we saw in a meeting a few weeks ago, where they had these very long, contentious arguments about the merits of Sunday voting or not. And ultimately, in every case where it was in dispute, the state board's new Republican majority voted against allowing it. What's interesting
I was going to say that I sit next to Kyle in both the press room and the newsroom, and you've gone through, I think you're about to get to it, where he said what's interesting, just watching you go through all the data for these different sites and comparing the years and realizing where the numbers work out. So I don't know if that's your point you're about to make, but that's my next question for you if it's not.
Well, yeah, and I was also just going to say it's interesting that not all of the counties that got rid of Sunday voting did so in disputed decisions. There were counties that unanimously the new Republican majority and the Democratic minority agreed to cut Sunday voting, which they had in the 2022 midterm primaries. So all of this sort of is showing some trends that we could see play out again whenever early voting is back up for consideration in the summer for the general election. I talked to Chris Cooper, who's a political scientist that knows all about North Carolina politics, and he said that really all of this seems to be the first round of a much bigger war that will be playing out about the general, which is when we'd also be more likely to see litigation around these sorts of issues.
Okay, so remind us, when does early voting start? It's coming up here pretty soon, right?
Yeah, so early voting starts, I believe in mid-February. I don't have the exact date in front of me right now, but it is coming up very soon.
I'll use this to plug our candidate questionnaires. We sent out, there are 49 contested primaries in the legislature. There's also Court of Appeals and there's Congress. And we sent out candidate questionnaires. If you haven't gotten them back yet, well, if you're probably, iced in at home, this is a good time to finish submitting your form so you don't have to hear us reminding you to do that. So we'll publish all of those in our voter guide in time for early voting, since we're already coming up on that pretty quick. Sticking with elections and the primary, Kyle, you've been covering a dispute about a candidate switching parties late in the game.
Yeah, so speaking of, contentious topics with the State Board of Elections, there was this really interesting case out of Wilson County where one of the candidates for sheriff had been a registered Republican for over a decade, but really soon before he filed to run for the sheriff's office, he accidentally, he says, switched his registration to Democrat for about 5 hours before he switched it back to Republican. And because of that, he is technically violating a state law that says that you have to be a member of a political party for 90 days before you can file to run for that party's primary. And so this issue got debated at the Wilson County level at their Board of Elections, where the board in a 4-1 bipartisan vote determined that even though he said it was an accidental change, he was in violation of the law and therefore he couldn't run in the Republican primary for sheriff. He ended up appealing that decision to the State Board of Elections, which heard the case last week and ultimately ruled in his favor and allowed him to go on the ballot and reverse that decision from the Wilson County. So this was along party lines. It was the Republican majority at the state level that ruled in his favor. They said they believed they had discretion to correct a legitimate error, but the people who were challenging this candidate's eligibility were saying that they didn't believe it was an error. You had one of the Democrats who was running for that office claiming that this was actually a strategic maneuver and that the candidate was trying to determine which party the outgoing sheriff was going to endorse. Of course, the candidate in question disputes this, but it all just got very messy very quickly. And, Wilson County isn't necessarily our coverage area, but it's such an interesting little technicality in state law that ended up becoming really controversial. And people are still talking about it. The House Democratic leader Robert Reeves, the Democratic Party chair Anderson Clayton, they both came out with statements that were very upset about this. They said that the board was selectively applying the law. And then you had the board chair write this letter to Robert Reeves responding to his criticisms and saying, no, we had the right to do this, et cetera, et cetera. So it's interesting, and I'm not sure what it portends for the future. If maybe in the short session we see some sort of legislative attempt to address situations like these or spell out the board's ability to correct what they believe to be errors. But it was just a very unexpected turn of events.
Okay. What's that phrase? All politics is local.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Before we take a break, I want to start talking about UNC Board of Trustees, which Jane dove headfirst into her first week here at the NNO. And Kyle, you had covered a protest before this meeting. And Jane, you were at this meeting this past week about cuts to some programs. People might lose their jobs over this. So what's going on?
Hi, Dawn. Thank you for having me. I've been a long time listener and fan of the podcast, so I'm really grateful to be here. So the Board of Trustees cut or plans to cut another $17 million in administrative costs. And that includes further cuts to academic centers like the area study centers that were slated to be closed. That is a big deal for a lot of students. The student body president, who's a member of the board, and his senior advisor presented to the trustees this past week about, arguing to keep those centers, and that you can't really put a price on the value that they give to students. But it really remains to be seen how much effect that's going to have on the trustees' decision.
Mm-hmm. Do you know when the final decision is going to be, or how are we kind of months out from the impacts to these programs?
It's really hard to tell. There's a lot that's kind of shrouded in a lack of clarity, but I think it's not set in stone, but it's getting there.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the trustees, the future of the Dean Dome, what to expect at Board of Governors and House Oversight, plus our picks for Headliner of the Week. We'll be right back.
Springfest is happening now at Lowe's. Keep the spotlight on your yard with Stay Green Premium 2 cubic foot mulch, 5 bags for $10. Plus, when you want more help indoors, get up to 40% off select major appliances that help you supercharge your chores. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid to 4/22 while supplies last. Selection varies by location. See Lowe's.com for details. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii.
Chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can make me feel like a spectator in my own life.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine preventive treatment.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor, visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com, or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with democracy reporter Kyle Ingram and higher education reporter Jane Sartwell. Before the break, we were talking about the UNC Board of Trustees and potential cuts that are coming. Something else that's big and top of mind it's literally big and top of mind for a lot of people is the future of the Dean Dome. Jane, you talked to Chancellor Lee Roberts, other reporters after this meeting. What's the future of the Dean Dome? Where are we now? We all know Roy Williams came out against moving it, but what else is going on?
Yeah, so the trustees approved $8 million to hire a design team to start drafting up the plans for Carolina North. The major question is whether the Dean Dome will be located there or whether they'll renovate the existing location on campus. They're not ready to make a comment on that, that's for sure. But in the reporter's gaggle after the trustees meeting, Chancellor Roberts just said he was so glad that people care enough about UNC basketball that this is even a hot topic of contention, which was, a clever way of continuing to dodge the question about the future.
Mm-hmm. And it also kind of, I don't know what their record is now, Kyle. You can tell me what it is if you follow it. Hasn't been perfect under Coach Hubert Davis, and maybe a little distraction from UNC's football season. I don't know if you want to chime in here, Kyle.
I'm an alum and I'm a fan, but I am not someone who keeps up very intensively with the sports aspect of it all.
Okay. Well, this week you'll be covering Board of Governors. What can we expect out of that?
One really interesting thing they'll be discussing is the invention or the proposition of a definition of academic freedom across the UNC system. So that's a concept that comes up repeatedly in system policies, but as of yet has no concrete parameters or definition. This is a hot topic among, across the country right now of what is protected and what is not protected types of speech and course material. There's some key, things that are not in the agenda that they say that they're considering, excluding from academic freedom, which is content that's clearly unrelated to the course, using university resources to advocate for ideological positions, or refusing to comply with institutional policies. And students also, there'll be, implications for students as well, as far as what you can and cannot do in a classroom. So it's a big deal for people involved in the system across, all levels.
And something that I feel like we've, seen come up at the legislature. Of course, they're not in session now. And they've, the General Assembly has shown that there is influence on Board of Governors and even down to trustee level through the Board of Governors. So at the legislature this week, there will be a House Oversight Committee. This is something that we previewed on our last Under the Dome podcast with my Charlotte Observer colleague, Mary Ramsey, if you all want to go back and listen to that. It's focused on public safety. Sheriff McFadden, Mecklenburg County Sheriff, will be here in Raleigh. Mayor of Charlotte, Vi Lyles, is expected to be here, and that's Thursday morning. Right now, it looks like the weather is better. I don't know if we'll get worse weather at the end of the week, but as of here midday Monday, that meeting is still on. That's pretty much the only big thing going on at the legislature. They do have the gavel in and out session scheduled the second week in February, and a lot of these study committees going on. Pretty much mostly everything is happening on the House side. So moving on to our picks for headliner of the week. Kyle, I'll start with you. Who or what is your headliner?
I'll make my headliner Oscar nominations, which came out last week. I'm a big movie fan. I was very happy with the batch of nominees this year. I think 2025 was a great year for movies. And personally, I'm rooting for Sinners all the way. It's my favorite movie of the year. Just a vampire musical. What more could you ask for?
All right. I'll stick with the visual entertainment theme for my headliner. I finished watching Stranger Things. I did not get on the Stranger Things train all the years that everybody else did, but once all the finale hubbub came about, myself and my family, we watched the whole thing and just finished it on this past Saturday. And I thought season 5 was fine. And I liked that. I don't remember if it was season 3 or 4 where the episodes were all like 2 hours. So I feel like that was like a double season, and some of it wasn't the best, in TV. A lot of it was just really great and kind of I don't know, there's a reason that it stands out so much and has such a significance to so many people. And I'm going to miss, coming home from work and being like, oh, we need to watch Stranger Things. So if anyone has any new shows, I'm listening to recommendations. I don't like the horror yuck stuff, but I liked all of the 80s stuff and just the whole ensemble cast. My favorite was probably Nancy. So I don't know. I know that Kyle has watched Stranger Things because he influenced me thinking on some things. Jane, have you seen it?
I haven't, but I want to because it's generated so much discourse.
Yeah, it has. All right, Jane, we'll end with you. What's your pick for headliner of the week?
My pick is going to be Drake May, Charlotte native and UNC Chapel Hill graduate, headed to the Super Bowl. I believe he is the second youngest quarterback to play in the Super Bowl at only 23 years old. He's the pride of North Carolina. We just wish he was playing for the Panthers, of course.
All right. Well, that's all we have. Thanks again to Jane for her first time on the podcast. You'll be hearing a lot more from her in the coming weeks, months, and years here. For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan. For Jane Sartwell, Kyle Ingram, and producer Kevin Keister. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, And sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.